Hey there folks, welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Ariel Pink called Dedicated to Bobby Jameson. So nearly every single review of this record I've seen starts off with a brief story about Bobby Jameson, a forgotten singer-songwriter in the mid-60s who was heavily promoted and developed a bit of a cult following before getting eaten alive by the music industry and a lot of his own appetites. Not exactly a pleasant story, but it's not really a surprising one either if you know the music industry. And there really is no obvious villain. Sure, the music industry didn't make things easy for more protest-minded artists like Jameson, even in the 60s. But drug and alcohol abuse on his part didn't help matters, and he spent chunks of the 70s institutionalized or homeless. He resurfaced in the public eye after his 1965 record Songs of Protest and Anti-Protest was reissued without his knowledge, and from 2007 onwards he put together a combination of blog posts and videos on YouTube detailing his experiences, up until his unfortunate death in 2015. Now here's the thing, I actually found his channel. I watched a couple of his videos, where he had some of his music, a few vlogs, and some footage from protest events, and a few things struck me. Number one, you can tell he found the internet as a potent outlet to let off some steam at an industry that kind of screwed him, a renegade voice for the void like so many others on this platform. But at the same time, he also reminded me of a lot of older ex-musicians that I've met, particularly out of the indie or the punk scene. Pretty smart, appreciative of his tiny audience, but also bitterly cynical and not quite as self-aware as he might seem. And a lot of it kind of pretty tough to watch, especially as it has the homespun quality of a channel that was never even going to break 1,000 subscribers. And thus, it's absolutely no surprise that Ariel Pink found this guy and wrote an album dedicated to him. Hell, on some level, given Ariel Pink's own peripheral placement in the music industry as a weird, often misunderstood outcast cribbing from the garbage of pop culture, and with a bad habit of antagonizing people. Look up his minor feud with Grimes if you want to get a sense of that. He probably viewed Bobby Jameson as something of a kindred spirit, or his career arc as somewhat prophetic for Pink himself going forward. And while I personally have never been a huge Ariel Pink fan, he does have a lifetime pass for me for Round and Round. That means I'm always going to listen to whatever he puts out, even if I like and appreciate it more than I outright love it. So okay, what did we unearth with Dedicated to Bobby Jameson? Well, I feel I got both more and less than what I expected, which is to some extent should not be all that surprising coming from Ariel Pink. This is not exactly a straightforward tribute to Bobby Jameson, both in its sound and in a lot of its content, with his figure more of a name to hangover or a collection of scattered musings about death and aging as an artist and what that ultimately means for the art itself. And of course, Ariel Pink is not making this easy on the audience, so he pushes the sound through the gummy layers that some have argued are a bit of a return to his lo-fi roots, in comparison with the shrieking, garish technicolor of Pom Pom, which returns pretty mixed results, all things considered. So in other words, I will not say this is better than Before Today, which is probably still his best work, but it is a slightly easier listen than his last two albums in terms of song structure and overall tune, at least when it comes to an Ariel Pink project, that is. Most of the mainstream will still run screaming. So let's start off instead with the content and the thematic arc for a change, to the extent that there actually is one. At first, you get the impression that Ariel Pink is toying with imagery of meeting God and death and endings in his usual semi-detached way that's kind of earnest but only in peripheral. But why then interject a song like Feels Like Heaven so early in the track listing? One of the more straightforward love songs that Ariel Pink has ever written. Or follow it a few songs later with Santa's in the Closet, one of the less listenable songs that Ariel Pink has released in recent memory, as he portrays Santa Claus as a drooling, perverted, near-suicidal mess. Which is a little bit fascinating when you consider how that figure in popular culture is immortal and immortalized. He might want to go to hell and just end it all, but he can't get there. So thoroughly defined by the culture around him, he's gonna live forever whether he likes it or not. And it becomes apparent that the album is less focused on death than it is lost potential and misbegotten truth. The title track, it focuses on Jameson's disappearance from public eye and alienated disgrace, and Another Weekend shows Ariel Pink himself seeing his own time slip further from his fingers. So he wants to be young. He wants to go back and relive bad decisions, see that potential stretching ahead of him, and maybe in those bubblegum-scented dreams. And yet, amusingly, only a few songs later, we see him squandering that potential too, and all the more lazy, hedonistic debauchery, as you would kind of expect from him. Again, you see how someone like Ariel Pink might have seen parallels between his own career and Jameson's, but he's also self-aware enough to know the value of that potential to an audience that he does have. The blank cassette that could represent everything for him and anybody else, even if he might just repeat the same path over and over again. The knowledge of a connection that doesn't even need recorded evidence, it's just gonna stick with you, because on some level, he knows all this is an act. I mean, it's a fascinating choice to end the album with acting, but the subtext is worth examining on this project, because no art is entirely representative of the artist's human experience. Not at least all of it, especially in a town like LA that's obsessed with holding on to the veneer of youth, whether you want it or not. So when you have artists like Ariel Pink who showcase all the misshapen facets of those human cravings and phobias, let's call that truth, it picks up a certain power for him to even admit and look into the camera and say, this is all still something of an act. Now, of course, if you're expecting this to be Ariel Pink's version of Orson Welles' legendary film F for Fake, you're not entirely getting that. Despite similar themes, Ariel Pink is fumbling towards truths that Welles managed to crystallize and articulate with stunning potency, while Ariel Pink is more interested in untangling his own story and all of its gooey redirects and false starts. Hell, the song I Wanna Be Young came from those early cassette days. He's covering himself from the Scared Famous compilation in 2002, and Acting is a remix of sorts of a damn funk collaboration from 2 years ago off of Invite the Light. But at the same time, look at the production, and it's hard not to see a certain twisted parallel between parts of this album and F for Fake, and only in terms of how low-grade footage and low-fidelity mixes have a similar gummy, decomposing vibe with fragments of stunning clarity amidst all the work, and how puerile it can be around the edges. Ariel Pink, of course, isn't really all that consistent with any of it. Another Weekend takes gentle, psychedelic acoustics and splits up the liquid synths with spongy effects, and despite the lower fidelity of some of the pickups, the balance of the multi-track vocals still has some impressive clarity and swell, and that's before you get songs that aren't far removed from your average jangle pop or garage rock tune in their pickup. The sandy burble of synths and clear Freeman vocals on Kitchen, which are a prime example of this, and the noisy royal of Bubblegum Dreams would not be that far removed from that last Always record. Hell, you can go to a song like Death Patrol with its sandy drum machine knocks against the 80s funk of that bass line, and it would not be that far removed from your average cop show knockoff. Same thing with Acting with Damn Funk, only with a little bit more auto-tune and a hint more groove behind it. It's not a bad way to end off the album. But at the same time, if you're into the weirder side of Ariel Pink that's a little bit less concerned with structure or making sure any of the sounds remotely decent, there's plenty of that too. And like with previous records, it's also where I find him the most hit and miss, especially vocally. The runny synths behind Santa's in the Closet, it might have been tolerable if Ariel Pink wasn't contorting his voice into what sounds like a croaking faux German accent that really runs out the clock pretty fast. And that's where we get the squeaky shrillness behind I Wanna Be Young. That sounds like Ariel Pink tried whatever he could to improve upon that song 15 years ago, but it's still kind of really grating, especially in that falsetto. And that's where you get the cacophony of Time to Live that tries to have some structure behind it, but ultimately doesn't really resolve itself much into a message that works. And I would be remiss to mention how Ariel Pink always has remained a writer who's got a casual disinterest and good taste, which means songs like the title track might have great hooks. It's also one of the best songs on this album that, from a melodic point of view, it isn't exactly something I feel remotely comfortable singing along with. And if you hear that hook, you will understand why. And on top of all that, well, some will consider this more of a back-to-basics approach for Ariel Pink for sounds that he has neglected on his more polished tunes around the turn of the decade, and I know that sound has its fans. I'm not gonna lie and say that his most refined tracks, both here and records like Before Today, are the songs that I actually will go back to the most. It's just my own personal taste in that regard, especially as if Ariel Pink seems to have run out of ammunition to truly shock me with some of his weirder moments, it's not like some of the better parts on Pom Pom that really got under your skin. And you know what? To some extent, that's fine, because there are a fine set of songs here, some good hooks, some good melodies that I do like. But as a whole, it can feel a little bit thin, a little meandering in spots, scrambling for some bigger ideas that maybe closer consideration could have refined them all the more impressively. But at the same time, there's something uniquely gooey and misshapen about Ariel Pink that remains part of his fundamental appeal, and I get why he's had his cult following as long as he has with that sound. As such, I think a 7 out of 10 and a recommendation is fair, but I'm not sure how much I'll be all that interested in hearing Ariel Pink going back down this road if he doesn't continue into weirder but still catchy territory. Still, worthwhile experiment. It's got me to look at a forgotten character in music history, so I'll give him that. And you know what? If you're curious, check it out. It's worth something, I guess. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. I'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know Ariel Pink's a little bit weird, but hey, if you want to buy the record, links in the description below. Out of morbid curiosity, at least, it is worth something. And hey, I got the poll up here. For Arlo's hardcore Ariel Pink fans, I'm curious where you think this fits in with the rest of his discography, because again, I don't think this is better than Before Today, maybe not even on the same level as Pom Pom, but at the same time, I'm curious where you guys fall for the more diehard fans. Beyond that, if you guys want to support this channel, or you guys want to have some insight into my schedule, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors you get to add albums, movies, or even top 10 lists to that schedule. More details right there. It's going to be a busy couple of weeks, but till then, I'm Mark, you're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.